Thank you, Nina and Ricky. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News on tonight's headlines.
Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46% and much higher for certain items like cars.
Tonight, President Trump's sweeping tariffs are sparking global concern, with economists warning of potential economic fallout.
So my concern would be that if these tariffs are long-lasting, it could have quite significant effects on, the foundations of global economies.
And the Philippines' F-16 purchase and its reassurance to China. Myanmar's leader leaving for a summit amidst earthquake devastation. And how iconic artworks are now accessible to the visually impaired. And the news starts now. President Trump declares a new era of economic independence with sweeping tariffs on imports, but economists warn of potential global fallout and increased costs for American families.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday announced he would impose a 10% baseline tariff on all imports to the United States and higher duties on some of the country's biggest trading partners.
In the face of unrelenting economic warfare, the United States can no longer continue with a policy of unilateral economic surrender. We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries. We used to do it. We can't do it anymore.
The tariffs deepen a trade war he kicked off on his return to the White House and reverses decades of trade liberalization that have shaped the global order. He used a poster to illustrate reciprocal tariffs.
They like me, I like them.
Including 34% on China and 20% on the European Union. Trading partners are expected to respond with countermeasures of their own that could lead to dramatically higher prices for everything.
Effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles.
Meanwhile, a separate set of tariffs on auto imports that Trump announced last week will take effect starting on April 3rd. Economists have warned that tariffs could slow the global economy, raise the risk of recession, and increase living costs for the average U.S. family by thousands of dollars.
We should be very concerned. The last time trade war on this scale has happened was in 1930s. Exactly in 1930, it was Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, and it led to a global recession worldwide. And if this trade war escalates, we could see a slowdown of the global economy on the scale of a global financial crisis of 2014 and possibly deeper. And this is the largest threat which would affect the whole world.
So my concern would be that if these tariffs are long-lasting, it could have quite significant effects on, the foundations of global economies. I mean, so if I think we're going to apply it against a broad swath of countries on everything we import, I think, all products could get more expensive. I think the case with Taiwan is that we import a number of computer chips from them. And so, downstream from that is if computer chips become more expensive, then, perhaps personal computers become more expensive.
Now, President Trump has imposed new tariffs, and the Philippines is among the nations facing a 17% reciprocal duty. The tariffs, which also target China, Japan, the EU, and other ASEAN members, are significantly higher than the 10% baseline applied to some countries. The Philippine government is now assessing the potential economic impact. Now, that sentiment is echoed by Moody's Analytics. They note the Philippines' relatively low trade surplus with the U.S. and its long-standing alliance, making the 17% tariff particularly concerning. It was disappointing that the Philippines was not included in the list of countries that were served a baseline 10% tariff increase, given that it has a relatively low trade surplus with the U.S. and has been an ally of the U.S. for some time. The Philippine government is now working to determine the full extent of the economic consequences. Other Southeast Asian neighbors have been hit with even higher duties, such as Cambodia with 49%, Vietnam with 46%, Thailand with 36%, Indonesia with 32%, and Malaysia with 24%. Singapore, a key U.S. trading partner with a free trade agreement, is facing unexpected 10% tariffs. 10%. Now, the country's trade minister says they are disappointed but will not retaliate.
We are naturally disappointed that despite our strong and long-standing economic and commercial relationship with the U.S. under the U.S.-Singapore Free Trade Agreement, we are also subject to the same 10% baseline tariffs. The U.S.-Singapore FTA has been a very important FTA for both countries and has benefited the U.S. significantly. Under the FTA, we have recourse. We are able to take countermeasures and also seek dispute resolution. However, we have decided not to do so because imposing retaliatory import duties will just add cost to our imports from the U.S., and this will affect our consumers and our businesses.
A major trade clash looms as the EU warns of immense consequences from President Trump's tariffs.
U.S. President Donald Trump escalated a global trade war with new tariffs Wednesday that threatened to stoke inflation and stall growth. After Trump unveiled the plan, it left world markets rattled and drew condemnation from world leaders. They include a 10% tariff on most goods imported to the United States and much higher levies on dozens of trading partners, including allies. Japan and the European Union were not spared, facing 24% and 20% tariff rates respectively. Tokyo's government spokesperson called the tariffs extremely regrettable.
我が国は2019年以来、世界最大の対米投資国であります。で、日本企業は米国経済に多大の役割を果たしてまいりましたし、今もそうです。で、アメリカ政府に対しましては、これまで一方的な関税措置について、さまざまなレベルで見直しを申し出てまいりましたが、それにもかかわらず、このような措置が実施されたということは、極めて残念であり、不本意に思っております。WTO 協定や日米貿易協定との整合性について、我が国として深刻な懸念を有しております。私自身がトランプ大統領に直接話しかけていくということが適当であれば、最も適当な時期に、最も適切な方法で働きかけてまいるということを全く躊躇するものではございません。
While Ursula von der Leyen said they were a major blow to the world economy.
Millions of citizens will face higher grocery bills, medication will cost more, as well as transportation. Inflation will go up, and this is hurting in particular the most vulnerable citizens.
She said that the EU was already finalizing the first package of countermeasures in response to tariffs on steel and were preparing for more should negotiations with Washington fail. China was faced with a fresh 34% tariff on top of the 20% Trump previously imposed. The world's number 2 economy vowed its own retaliation despite a warning by U.S. Treasury Chief Scott Bessent that such moves would lead to escalation.
China has repeatedly stressed that there are no winners in trade wars and tariff wars, and there is no way out for protectionism. China urges the U.S. to correct its wrong practices and negotiate with countries around the world, including China, to resolve trade differences in an equal, respectful, and mutually beneficial manner.
Trump's top economist Stephen Miran said on Fox Business Wednesday the tariffs would work out well for the U.S. in the long run, even if they cause some initial disruption. However, outside economists have warned that tariffs could slow the global economy, raise the risk of recession, and increase living costs for the average American family by thousands of dollars. Even some fellow Republicans have expressed concern about Trump's aggressive trade policy. Hours after the announcement at the White House, the Senate voted 51-48 to approve legislation that would terminate Trump's Canadian tariffs, with several Republicans breaking with the president. Passage in the Republican-controlled U.S. House of Representatives, however, was seen as unlikely.
Okay, so something huge has just happened for the global economy. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced the steepest American tariffs in a century. This has big implications for businesses and consumers all around the world. We all trade with one another, and this move has just made trading way more expensive. Let's take a step back. What is a tariff? Well, it's a tax on goods and services coming into a country, on imports, and it's typically calculated as a percentage of the value of that good or service. Now, who pays? That's an interesting question. Domestic companies that are importing goods into a country typically pay the tariff, so US companies that are importing goods into the US will pay the tariff to US customs. Importers often then pass that cost on to customers by raising their prices. Trump's tariff plan is sweeping, and it upends the global trading order. He's imposing a minimum 10% tariff on all trading partners, but he's imposing higher rates on dozens of countries that have large trade surpluses with the US. So China, for instance, is being hit with a 34% tariff. That's on top of a 20% tariff that Trump had already imposed. Vietnam is facing a 46% levy and the European Union 20%. The global 10% tariff will go into effect on April 5th, and that's going to be replaced then by those individualised higher tariffs on April 9th. Trump has also introduced a 25% tariff on foreign-made cars and has previously imposed 25% duties on steel and aluminium imports. So why is he doing this? Trump and his advisors argue that decades of trade liberalisation have been bad for the US. They say that the US has been losing out because while its economy was open to trade, other countries have been protecting their own industries. Trump says that by building a tariff wall around the US economy, that will encourage foreign manufacturers and US companies operating abroad to build plants in the US and hire US workers. That all sounds great, so why are financial markets tanking? Tariffs tend to lead to price increases. Those importers tend to pass on the cost of the tariff to their customers. That means inflation or rising prices, which most of us are sick of, and it also puts people off spending, and that's bad for economic growth. Almost all analysts see the end of free trade as a shock to US and global economic growth, and they're going to be revising up the risk of recession. So what happens next? It's not clear how permanent these tariffs are going to be. The White House is saying it's open to horse trading with different countries, so we could be facing months of grueling trade negotiations. And all that uncertainty means it's going to be hard for firms and ordinary people to plan long-term investments. If you think of an example, if you're going to be building a house or doing renovations this year, if the steel that you need is going to cost 25% more, are you going to pay for it, or will you hold off to see how things develop? It's that kind of pause that's bad for businesses, workers, and economies overall.
The auto industry is also bracing for impact as President Trump's 25% tariffs take effect. From plant closures to price adjustments, the $460 billion levies are causing significant turmoil.
Donald Trump's 25% tariff on US auto imports kicks in Thursday, and the levies look set to upend the industry. A Reuters calculation shows the duties will hit some $460 billion worth of cars and parts every year. The US president says that will create jobs and boost the economy as automakers shift production to America.
These tariffs are going to give us growth like you haven't seen before, and it'll be something very special to watch.
With the tariffs on vehicles in effect, the levies on parts will then start next month. Economists have warned it's all likely to mean higher prices and reduced choice for consumers, and there are already signs that could be true. The Wall Street Journal says Volkswagen will introduce an import fee for vehicles affected by the duties. It says the German giant has halted shipments from Mexico for now and will inform dealers by mid-April how prices will change for imported cars. Meanwhile, Stellantis, the owner of brands including Jeep, will shut one major plant in Canada for 2 weeks. That's according to a union official there, who said the move was driven by the new tariffs. Such signs of turmoil are unlikely to worry Trump, however, who has said he couldn't care less if foreign cars get more expensive. He says Americans can just buy locally made autos instead. Ford has said it will offer big discounts from Thursday in a bid to make that happen. But many big-selling vehicles from US brands are actually made overseas or are full of imported parts. Trade expert Vladimir Tyazelnikov at the University of Sydney says that means the levies may not produce the effect Trump wants.
Many of those tariffs, they are imposed on parts and components, on inputs, which are used in production of American goods. So the effect on many industries, such as car manufacturing, could be the opposite. It would make goods produced in the US more expensive and therefore less competitive on international markets and less affordable in the domestic American market.
For now, prices may not rise immediately as dealers have pre-tariff cars in stock, but a surge in sales over the first quarter of the year suggests consumers are rushing to snap up those vehicles. Once they're gone, price rises may not be far behind.
President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs had triggered a global sell-off. Now markets are reacting sharply to the new levies with fears of rising prices and a constrained global economy.
Global stocks tumbled Thursday as markets digested Donald Trump's big reveal on tariffs. A day earlier, the US president set out sweeping new levies that exceeded most expectations.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time.
Trump set a minimum 10% tariff on most imports, with much higher rates on some countries. The move sparked an immediate sell-off, with Nasdaq futures falling 4%. Some $760 billion was wiped off the value of the so-called Magnificent Seven big tech stocks in US after-hours trade. Among them, Apple, which makes iPhones in China, down nearly 7%. The slide then rolled on in Asian trade Thursday. In Japan, hit with a 24% tariff, the Nikkei index was down around 3% by mid-morning. Hong Kong's Hang Seng fared slightly better, down around 1.5%, with techs also hit hard there. Computer maker Lenovo was off about 5% early on. Markets have been roiled for weeks by Trump's on-off approach to tariffs. Now Delaware University economist Thomas Bridges says that uncertainty has at least been eased, but he says wider concerns remain.
It's unclear how that relates to this administration's economic objectives, and I'm not entirely clear what their economic objectives are. It seems to be just more isolationist, but I think that will end up yielding a more constrained economy.
Trump says the tariffs will raise revenue and create jobs in the US, but economists widely predict they will raise prices and cast a chill over global growth. Such worries have seen money flow into traditional safe havens. On Thursday, gold hit fresh record highs above $3,160 per ounce, while government bonds and the Japanese yen also saw gains.
The Philippines is reassuring China that its potential purchase of F-16 fighter jets from the U.S. poses no threat. National Security Council spokesperson Jonathan Malaya addressed China directly, stating the planned acquisition is not aimed at any third party. And this comes after the U.S. State Department approved a possible sale of 20 F-16s to the Philippines, estimated at $5.58 billion. We would like to assure the People's Republic of China that the planned procurement of the F-16 fighter jets to the Philippine arsenal does not in any way harm the interest of any third party. The Pentagon says the F-16s would enhance the Philippines' ability to patrol its territory and improve military interoperability with the U.S. However, Malaya clarified that the Philippine government has not yet received official communication from the U.S. regarding this approval. And this development follows U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's recent visit to Manila, where he reaffirmed the U.S.'s ironclad commitment to its defense treaty with the Philippines and pledged to bolster deterrence against threats, including what he termed Chinese aggression.
So we will ensure the freedom of navigation returns to that part of the world, just as pertinent to our conversation today, freedom of navigation is something the Philippines experiences in the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea. It's something we take very seriously.
China claims it has dismantled the Philippine spy network, arresting 3 individuals. Take a look. This announcement comes amid escalating tensions between the two nations over the West Philippine Sea or South China Sea and the growing U.S.-Philippine security ties. China state media reports the arrested individuals were recruited by Philippine intelligence tasked with gathering sensitive military information.
Relevant Chinese departments have announced the specific circumstances of Filipinos in China engaging in espionage activities. Chinese judicial organs and relevant departments will strictly handle cases in accordance with the law and will also protect the legitimate rights and interests of relevant personnel.
CCTV broadcast footage of one arrest and a purported confession alleging the spies conducted surveillance near Chinese military facilities. China alleges the spies provided a large amount of military-related and confidential video materials causing serious harm to China's national security. The arrests follow recent reports of Chinese nationals being detained in the Philippines and a travel warning issued by the Chinese embassy in Manila.
Recently, the Philippines has fabricated many so-called Chinese espionage cases and has engaged in presumption of guilt, stigmatization and politicization without clear facts. China firmly opposes this and has made solemn representations on many occasions. China urges the Philippines to stop making groundless accusations, handle individual cases involving Chinese citizens in accordance with the law and fairly, and effectively protect the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese citizens in the Philippines.
This development further strains relations between China and the Philippines, already fraught with disputes over territorial claims and the Philippines' strengthening alliance with the United States. As both nations trade accusations, the incident raises concerns about increased espionage activities and the potential for further escalation in the region. And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. Even as Myanmar reels from a devastating earthquake, its isolated leader, Min Aung Hlaing, is set to leave for a regional summit in Bangkok. Take a look. Aid groups are pleading for easier access to survivors, while the junta and rebel groups trade accusations amid ceasefire announcements and ongoing conflict.
First thing that I think that really needs to be said is that this is a crisis on top of another crisis for children in Myanmar. So even before this earthquake, 6 million children in Myanmar were in need of humanitarian assistance. Now we've seen the official figures in terms of the death toll. We think it's very likely that there are hundreds of children that are among the dead. We believe that there are children that are under the rubble. If we're not able to reach these children, we don't have the support, yes, there's a risk of children dying, because we know that it's very likely that disease will proliferate. There will be disease in the earthquake-affected area.
WFP is on the ground. We have been for many years. We're now scaling up our operations to do emergency food distributions and also to provide emergency logistics and IT for the broader humanitarian response. It's essential that we get the levels of funding. We then need the access, and only then will we be able to have the impact that's required.
We were on the way home on the bridge when we felt the earth start to shake, and I stopped my motorcycle because I thought I had a flat tire. But when I realized that it was an earthquake, I started to panic as we were in the middle of the bridge, and we could go neither backwards or forward. The bridge was vibrating so strongly that we were thrown around, and within seconds, it was falling down. I called out to my daughter to hold on to me, but suddenly, both my daughter and motorcycle dropped into the river. I fell into the water as well. I managed to make my way to shore, and that was when I realized that she was still in the water, and I began searching for her. I feel that my daughter is still alive, next to me. Even though I know she has died, I am searching for her myself, as there are no rescue operations here. I have to hire divers myself for the search. $50 for the preliminary search, $200 if they find her body. I am struggling to pay them for the search, but I have to do it myself. No one is here to help me.
The powerful 7.7 magnitude quake has left thousands dead and millions in need of aid. China state media reports the death toll has now surpassed 3,000. The disaster comes as Myanmar struggles with the aftermath of a 2021 military coup, leading to international isolation and a widespread civil war. Despite the crisis, Min Aung Hlaing will attend a summit in Bangkok, a rare foreign trip for a leader considered a pariah by many nations. And this comes as the junta announces a 20-day unilateral ceasefire while warning rebels against attacks. Aid agencies describe a dire situation with overwhelmed hospitals and shortages of essential supplies. Human rights groups accuse the junta of hindering aid delivery with tight security measures. An incident involving warning shots fired at a Chinese Red Cross convoy underscores the challenges of delivering relief in a conflict zone. Despite the announced ceasefire, reports of airstrikes and military activity near quake-affected areas continue. Min Aung Hlaing accuses rebels of planning attacks, while a major rebel alliance has also declared a unilateral ceasefire for humanitarian aid. Prior to the junta's ceasefire, the UN Special Rapporteur on Myanmar condemned the military's attacks as outrageous, calling for strong international condemnation. And Chinese rescuers have achieved a remarkable rescue in Myanmar. More than 120 hours after the massive earthquake, a survivor has been pulled from the rubble by Chinese rescuers. The rescue comes as the death toll surpasses 3,000 following the 7.7 magnitude quake last Friday. Now the man is reported to be in stable condition. The Philippines is bracing for a potential massive earthquake dubbed the Big One. The government reveals many public buildings need urgent retrofitting to withstand the anticipated force. The Department of Public Works and Highways has assessed over 21,000 public buildings nationwide, according to DPWH Undersecretary Maria Catalina Cabral.
So, as of to date po, nakapag-assess na kami ng more than 21,000 public buildings na at ito ay marami dito i-recommend na namin for retrofitting. Pero meron na rin kaming natapos na retrofitting. Ang ibig lang sabihin ng retrofitting ay iakyat ang kanyang standards para sa international earthquake standards.
In Metro Manila alone, the DPWH has completed assessments on over 124 buildings. The Big One, a potential magnitude 7.2 earthquake from the West Valley Fault, looms as a significant threat. The Office of the Civil Defense is also emphasizing the critical need for strict compliance with the building code to ensure all infrastructure can withstand such a powerful quake.
Yung tatayo pa lang, ang dapat talaga sundin na nito yung strict provisions of the building code, ano? Na kaya nitong matatag ito sapat para kahit gano'ng kalakas ang lindol hanggang 8.5 magnitude, kayanin. So yung itatayo pa lang, yun yung hiningi ng tulong ng ating Office of the President na yung mga LGUs natin ay nasa balikat po nila yan primarily. Tulungan tayo masigurado na ibibigay nilang construction permits ay tama at yung occupancy permits ay dapat tama rin, meaning yung plano ay ginawa. Kasi iba po yung plano, iba sa implementation.
As the threat of the Big One remains, the government is urging swift action to retrofit buildings and ensure infrastructure safety, highlighting the urgent need for preparedness. Iconic artworks like the Mona Lisa and the Scream are now accessible to those with visual impairments, transformed into immersive audio experiences. Take a look.
Could music help the visually impaired experience art?
So the first hit appears there,
Iconic masterpieces including Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa and Edward Munch's The Scream are being turned into immersive audio experiences for those with visual impairments. The project, called Sound of a Masterpiece, is the brainchild of visually impaired composer Bobby Golder in partnership with composers from the New Radiophonic Workshop.
We were aiming not just to kind of write something based on the piece, but actually bring people further into the painting, and you can do that very effectively through music and soundscape.
At the heart of the project is audio technology that allows for sounds to be precisely placed and moved in three-dimensional space, including overhead, to create an immersive soundscape.
With Dolby Atmos and the surround sound speaker system, you can really kind of immerse yourself in the sonic experience, and with kind of several dimensions of sound, kind of with a spectrum of sound across, from left to right, up and down, forwards and backwards.
Golder, who lives with Stargardt's macular dystrophy, is a professional pianist, composer and musical director. His collaboration is seeking to bridge the gap between art and the visually impaired at a time when, according to recent research, almost half of the UK population do not feel that they can truly appreciate art.
There's so many things to consider when you're working with artwork and trying to kind of create parallels with music and sound, because we were trying to take into account not just the subject of what's kind of viewable on the canvas, but also the context in which the painter was working, and perhaps some of their character and some of their wider ideas, and really draw out those emotions.
The album features sonic interpretations of artworks such as Jean-Michel Basquiat's King of Egypt, David Hockney's A Bigger Splash, and Salvador Dali's The Persistence of Memory. It is available on various streaming platforms, and all proceeds are donated to the Royal National Institute of Blind People.
And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.